Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. So I will start off with some good news. I don't have any fodder for y'all. I'm like, what are we going to talk about today? There's no drama. And I think what I told you was we've got a whole new team, so there's no really time for drama just yet. Everybody's on their best behavior and we're all trying to figure out stuff together since we're starting over.
But this momentary bliss of no drama, right?
Yes.
Isn't that nice?
You tell me, we've talked very little in the last month.
I know.
And I'm like, I'm used to talking to you in panic calls, like four panicked voicemails a day. So it feels kind of like withdrawal. But dare I say, in a way, it's been nice.
Yes.
That I've not been, I'm sure it's been nice for you, not getting bombarded with.
We'll take the breaks when we can get them, right?
There you go. Ups and downs. So I was like, what are we going to talk about? But I wanted to talk about, if you're okay with, I really loved the episode with Dr. Smith last week. And I think, 80% of me was like, okay, this gives me hope. Keep going. For him to continue to grow and, like you said, break trends. I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more, what is he doing? Why do you think that is? How can I replicate that? The other 20% of me was like, dude, that seems like a lot of work. Do I really want to put in the work, or do I just want to sell to a DSO? So, but obviously, we all want to be successful and we all would prefer to avoid the DSO path, I think, if we could. So I think what I wanted to talk about with you today was, why do you think that is? I know he talked some about things he's doing, but obviously being in the seat, you're just doing what you know to do, or what feels right to you, or what feels authentic to you. And I think that's the word we're going to be the word of the day, if you will, for today, is the authenticity. Because he just sounded really authentic and genuine. And, I think, how do the rest of us try to capture that? And I think most of us are trying to do that, or we are. Anyway, you and I were briefly talking about this before when I was telling you how much I loved his podcast last week. But I think from him doing it and being it, it's hard to know what you're doing versus what somebody else is doing. Yeah. Because you're just in your bubble trying to make your own path. You're not really thinking about what everybody else is doing.
100%. Yeah.
Which I think is his secret sauce, if you will. But I think you then, where I'm asking you is, he probably doesn't know what he's doing and not doing that's different from what everybody else is doing, because he's just doing what he's doing. So you, as his consultant and a bunch of other people's consultant, and looking at what you see, I was hoping maybe you could shed some light on what is it that he's doing. And I know he told us a lot about what he's doing, but that's from his perspective. I kind of wanted to know from an outsider perspective, what pearls do you have for the rest of us to break trends like what he's doing? What is he doing that's so different?
It's so interesting to think about him and so many of my clients. I was telling you, I just feel like I'm really blessed with just really good people. And that authenticity that you kind of heard from him, that he just seems genuine. That is who he is. And as you and I were briefly talking about him before we started this episode, I was thinking about him in particular, and who you heard on the episode last week is who he is. He's got this just kind of confidence about him. He knows what he's doing. He knows why he's doing it, which is probably more important, that he's conducted business in a way that is not just business. He truly cares. That I don't know that you could necessarily pick that up in the episode, but he's just got you could almost smell it coming out. You could tell he's just so super genuine, and he's there. I've never met him, but I felt like we've never talked about him, so I had no idea what to expect out of that podcast. And he just seems so down to earth and just very much like, I'm led by the decision based off what's right. Yes. I feel like that's key and I feel like he does what's right across the board. He does what's right with his team. He does what's right with his patients. He's got a very clear perception of who he is and why he's doing what he's doing. And I would say one of the things that is unique about him is he's very content in his practice. And like we talked about, I mean, it's consistently grown, it's broken trends. He should be content with the numbers, but I think he's got a contentment about, even as I look back and we've had, he's had random people departing, from, employees that have left him when we weren't expecting it. It's not that he's not been hit with what everybody else is being hit with, but he's got kind of this calm confidence about the practice is going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to keep just doing the right thing for the right reasons and things will be fine. And remarkably, they have been. And as we were talking about it, I realized that really, when I was thinking through some of my practices that kind of break the trends and don't necessarily fall into the pattern that the dental field is experiencing, it really is people that have this just kind of strong confidence in who they are, but then also that confidence leads to a type of customer service, so to speak, that's very endearing. I think when patients meet them, they feel like they're getting the very true, genuine person, and they feel very connected to that authenticity, and there's a trust factor that they can formulate pretty quickly.
I think what I don't like hearing about that is that how do you duplicate that? Like, how do I get a pearl from what you're doing, Dr. Smith, to do that so that I can also be successful? Because I think it goes back then to, like, as a person, who are you? And I would say the next challenge is what I said a few minutes ago is I think we all think we are authentic and genuine. I think we all do think that we're making smart business decisions and smart customer service decisions and staffing decisions. Like, which one of us is like, nope, I'm just in it for me? And I mean, if you are, then hopefully you are, you're not hiding from that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's people that are like, nope, this is the me show. And I honestly, I don't think that's wrong as long as you own it. And then, but I think it's, my question to you was, how do you, because I think the majority of us want to make an impact and want and think we are. So I think where you and I were talking, if you don't mind going into, and I know I'm putting you in a weird position here, but several of your clients, and I know some of them, but the majority I don't know. But you were giving me examples of, so I don't want to put you in a weird spot because I'm sure your clients listen to this, but you were giving me examples of some that also like Dr. Smith, who are very different than Dr. Smith and have different practices.
Yes.
So I'm hoping, like, maybe going through several other examples you could.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to unpack some similarities that I see. So obviously you got to hear Dr. Smith last week, and we know about his practice, which is a small, I say small, productive, but a small team of people, only a few people on his team, out of network almost completely. And he owns that in a lot of ways. Like, it's almost like he and the practice are one and the same, like the practice is an excellent representation of him as a person. Very on the total opposite end of the spectrum, I've got a client with a very large practice. So multiple doctors, I think we're at seven hygienists now, a team of, I guess we're at 27 people altogether now. So very, very large practice, what I would consider completely opposite of Dr. Smith's practice. And somehow through the years of all this growth, the owning doctor has kept this very clear focus on what he wanted the practice to be about. To the point that he can very clearly articulate this practice is benefiting him, right? Personally, financially, he's got a good life because of this practice. And he's very clear with that. But that is not the point. That is, he's never communicating to his team or to his patients that this practice is about him. And I don't think he could clearly say that the practice is about him. Does he care that it pays the bills and that it gives him and his family a good life? Absolutely. He'd be, we'd all be stupid to not admit that they're one and the same. But I think his focus in any team meeting that he leads, in any conversation with his associate doctors, he's in the process of bringing on a new associate. And man, that bar is high for that associate because he is unwilling to compromise on the things that have made his practice unique, which is, it's a huge practice, but it's got a very small town, one-on-one, almost unassuming type patient interaction. So it's a beautiful building, lots of operatories, lots of team members, and yet each patient interaction, and this has been very intentional with him, each patient interaction should feel like we know you, the patient, on an incredibly deep level. And that's not a facade, that's not fake. He wants his team members to get to know your patients take time. Yes, we want to be efficient, but take time in that appointment to get to know them and talk to them. Make sure there's the feeling of that appointment is not rushed, but then also, as the owner, I challenge you, get to know your patients, build a relationship with them. And that has led to this, over the years of this growth, this massive practice that has this very particular feel. And then that leads to a reputation in the community that's very attractive to people. So he's so clear on what he wants out of every single patient interaction. He's communicated that with clarity. And I would say, backing it up a step further, yes, that benefits him, but that's not the point. That's never been the point. It's never been like, hey, you need to conduct patient appointments in this way because it's my reputation on the line. No, it's because it's the right thing to do. Like, patients want to feel a certain way when they're in the chair. And I want to make sure that they get the best quality care. And we do that when we know our patients. And so it's been very, I would say, ethically, morally driven because it's the right thing to do. And that has then made the practice this huge practice that's feeding the doctor very well, but that was never the intent.
So, and that's the vibe I got with Dr. Smith.
Yeah.
Like, you could almost say the exact same thing
Yep.
for his practice, even though they're two very totally different practices. Mm-hmm. But both are have enough competition that people could easily go somewhere else.
For sure.
And then you mentioned another client of yours that, if you don't mind talking about, female in a very, very competitive market.
Very.
Like, ridiculously competitive market. And do you mind talking
Absolutely.
about her?
So hers, I would say, would be right in between those two. So we've kind of got, Dr. Smith's side, which is a small team, still very productive practice, but very different than my really big practice. And she's kind of right in the middle. So, 2-doc practice, but she's full-time and just 1 day a week associate, 3 hygienists, very... When you look at her practice from a patient number standpoint, it's a large practice, but it doesn't feel like a large practice. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about her is she, and you've met her, so you know her and probably picked up on this, but she's one of the most confident individuals, things that come across our plate from a practice owner standpoint. You get a complaint from a patient via email. They email the doctor, which, by the way, the doctor gets those emails. So, and she's fine. She can handle it. She's just one of these uber confident people. It's like, bring the complaints to me. I can totally take it. And she can. So she's got this confidence about her that I love. But I think that confidence is built out of, she really knows who she is as a person. She was a competitive athlete. She had, just when you look back at her history, she's had to just perform and excel. And I think that's created a very confident person, which makes a lot of the practice decisions that she makes much easier for her than it would be any other a lot of other people that are kind of struggling with each and every decision. She's got this innate confidence about she's going to be fine, and I love that about her. But I think she too, similar to Dr. Smith and this other large practice that I'm referencing, she's got this focus on patient care and building connections and building relationships. I think that if there's a thread that connects all three practices, it's this desire to create a certain patient experience. And I think we all have that desire. But something about the three of these, if we're kind of drawing this continuum, they want to build this patient connection because it's the right thing to do. It's how they want to be treated as a patient. And there's a genuine focus on the patient. Like they genuinely want to get to know their patients. It's not just let's make it feel good because we want to get a good review out of this and we want to get referrals. That's not the intent. The intent is I want to do the right thing for this patient while they're in my chair, and I want to make them comfortable, and I want to get to know them better. And so she, I think, built her practice off of this. There's just a charm that she has in the way that she dialogues with patients. She's naturally funny. She just kind of kicks back and has this relaxed feeling in the moment. Even though she's incredibly confident and competent, she's got a very laid back, easygoing approach with the patients that are in her chair. And it's a very busy practice. There's a lot of patients that come and go. And when she kind of sits down in that room, it's like you feel like she's not thinking about anybody else but yourself, in this moment. So I think all three of them have this genuine focus on the patient and an actual genuine care about the patient. Not just because it protects my license, it prevents bad reviews, it's going to increase the profitability of my practice. I could say about all three of these practices, that's not even what they're thinking about. Now, do they manage the numbers? Do they monitor the numbers? Absolutely. So they're still being smart business-wise. But when it comes to that individual patient interaction, there's just a genuine care and concern that they have about each and every patient that comes through their chair.
So this is where I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a minute, because again, I would go back and say, don't all of your docs think they have genuine care? But yet you and I dialoguing, talking about some of your other clients that maybe aren't. So the point we were talking about this is all three of these practices have kind of broken the trends, like you've talked about. So when you talk about, the ups and downs and all of that, and these practices are continuing to grow and thrive in very busy markets.
Yeah.
And so what is the point then? Because then to me, then I'm like, okay, well, if that's the thread that connects them and that's what we're seeing, then the ones that are following the trends, what are they doing wrong? Is that a fair way to put it? Or is that?
Well, I think I think hopefully for anybody listening to this, it's a point to pause and reflect. And I don't think being a part of the trend is a bad thing. I think sometimes we're going to unintentionally fall into trend patterns, even if we are following this thread of these other three that I talked about.
It's definitely multifactorial.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to be said for periodically and regularly pausing and evaluating, am I genuine? Right. So one of the questions, or one of the things I said to you is, we've got to have this culture in our practice of self-reflecting, evaluating, like, would I feel comfortable today asking my team, what kind of leader do you say that I am? Like, if you had negative feedback for me, what would that be? Do you perceive me to be genuine, authentic? Do you feel like I truly care about my patients, about you as a team member? Those are hard questions. Like, if we really think about it, if we were to open ourselves up to that type of critique, that can be painful in the process. What I think about with these three practices that I just talked about is, as confident and competent and genuine as they are, all three of these practices open themselves up regularly for feedback.
How?
From their team. So with Dr. Smith, it's going to look a little bit different because it's a small team. He's constantly interfacing with all team members. And he's created this, just like he does with the patients, where it's very open, two-sided communication. He's got that same two-sided communication with his team. So they feel, just like the patients feel comfortable with him, they feel very comfortable with him. But what he does a step further, so I would say daily dialogue. They'll kind of be like, Dr. Smith.
When he did say something about how they're always picking on him and
Yes.
stuff like that. So he's created a culture where that's okay. Like being the only dude in the place, and he's
totally fine. And he can take it. And he handles it beautifully. Now, they're still respectful with it. I think that's what's important, is they'll give him a hard time, be like, Dr. Smith, you have got to stop walking patients up to this checkout line, because then you just get up here and you chat with the patients more, and then we've got a line building behind you like, please stop walking patients up. So they'll give him like daily feedback when something's happening, and he can take it. But it's done very respectfully. But he takes it a step further, and he does individual quarterly meetings with his team individually. So he'll take them out away from the office. There's a Palio's right across the street from his office. They go sit down with a drink, and he's like, okay, fill me in. How's it going? What do we need to be doing differently? What's going well? What do we need to be doing better? I was privileged enough to be able to sit in on his last round of these, and we did them together. And so I asked a few more detailed questions. And what's interesting is they always have something like, oh, maybe we could focus on this. Like, I feel like this is an area of the practice that we could focus on. How's communication going? How's dialogue with Dr. Smith going? And they're they know that they can share feedback without punishment, without negative comments, or without jerking around back like, oh yeah, okay, you say I'm not genuine, but are you genuine? Right? Like, he can take the feedback, and they're willing to give it. What's interesting is in these quarterly meetings, they don't have a ton to give because they give it all throughout. It's very open lines of communication. Same thing with the middle practice, kind of in between my big one and the little one. I'll say one thing interesting about all three of these practices that maybe is another thread that would connect them. There is no manager in all three of these. Even the large practice where you're like, what? 26, 27, 28 people, whatever it is now, there's no manager? No. There's no manager in place. And so what's interesting about all three of these is that the team has their direct supervisor is the practice owner. That is who they take their issues to. And so in this middle practice of mine, this female that's just confident, she is still, even with her team, very approachable. Now, what she does that's a little bit different than Dr. Smith, she's not having these individual meetings. We do annual reviews with her team. I step in and do some individual meetings with her team a couple times a year. So there is that feedback through me. But the team meetings, which I'm privileged enough to be a part of once a month, they're very dialoguing, right? So we'll have topics that we want to talk about, and then we open it up and we're like, okay, team, let's talk. What's going well? What do we need to change? Either systematically, what do we need to change in the practice, but also just how are we doing as a team? Very open, like they're willing to talk about, she's had a lot of temp hygienists in lately, and she's like, okay, what's y'all's feedback? Let's talk about this. And so just the way the team meeting is conducted is very collaborative. Like, it's not like, here's the doctor and she is leading this meeting. It's like, let's talk. And so that's really how I can't describe enough, and I would say the same about your team and your practice, the amount of respect that the team members have for each of these doctors. It's you can feel it in the room when you're in the room. Like, there's no animosity, and it's not that they don't get frustrated with these practice owners. It's just they respect them because they feel genuinely cared for by their practice owners. In each of these, the smallest team-wise practice being Dr. Smith, all the way up to the big one. there's a connection that they have with their practice owner and a respect that they have.
So, okay, I'm gonna challenge you again here and say, but I think most of us would like to think that that's what we have. Now, how do you determine if it's what you think versus what actually is? Because I'm sitting here thinking the whole thing too, going, wait, am I one of those that I just think I'm respected? Am I the one that thinks this? And for me, because I think because you and I have such a good friendship or camaraderie between us, that I think, like, yeah, a lot of this, like when you asked a minute ago, could you take your team coming and criticizing you? My first reaction is, I don't know that I'm too sensitive. Like, I don't know that I would take that. But I think my answer to that is, I think I don't let things escalate. Like, I'm pretty good about feeling out. Because I'm a feeler, I can feel when the vibe is off, and I'll usually tag you in. And I feel like you and I have a very good relationship where you would tell me. Mm-hmm. So then my question is, would you tell all your clients? Would you not? Anyway, so you don't have to answer that, because I don't mean to put you in the hot seat there and get yourself in trouble. But how would somebody know?
Well, this is where, to me, we don't know unless we ask. And to me, the people that are going to give you the best feedback are going to be your team members. And honestly, even you sitting there and evaluating that, like, could I take the feedback? You do. You take it all the time. Now, it's done in it's not like, hey, we're having a feedback session here. I want you to rate me on how I'm doing as a leader. So it's not done that pointedly. But you, very much similar to Dr. Smith, honestly, you have very open lines of communication with all your team members. It's still very clear you're the boss. And I think there's a healthy amount of respect and fear that people have for that. But you're dialoguing constantly, individually, with your team members. And we have very specific points where we're asking for feedback on how things are going. And a lot of times I am the one taking in that feedback. But one of the things that I do want to point out, because I would put you in this same line of people that I'm talking about, these 3 practices. One of the things that I feel like maybe you do uniquely from these 3 is, I've always said, you're hands down my most generous practice owner when it comes to what you're doing from a compensation package, how you show your appreciation throughout the year in a variety of ways. I mean, we were just looking at boo bags that you made for your staff members.
You've been booed.
Right, which is just a sweet little gift to show that you've thought about them, you've put time and effort into creating this sweet little gift. So I've always said that. Hands down, you go above and beyond when it comes to showing appreciation to your team. And let's say that you only did that you didn't have a lot of these one-on-one dialogues. I think that would be enough to compensate for a lot of lacking communication, let's say. So to me, it covers a multitude of quote-unquote sins that we might have in running our business. But you do both. You have all of this open communication, a lot of team meetings, a lot of one-on-one meetings where you are able to build these connections with your employees. And then you add on all the appreciation on top of that. And there is not only a genuine respect that they have for you, but a genuine appreciation that a lot of your team members have. And I think you could handle, if you just sat down with any one of your team members and you said, give me your feedback on me as a leader. Give me your feedback on me as a doctor. Do you feel like I'm genuine and doing the right thing? Would you describe me as somebody that does the right thing at all times? Do you feel like here's a hard question. Do you feel like I'm more focused on myself or others? That's a hard question to ask. And I understand that opens up potentially Pandora's box in some cases. But how do we know without asking for feedback?
So then my question's going to be, but why do we care? Like, why are we even having this topic? Because I started off, like, we didn't start off talking about this. We started talking about the shortage of staff. Mm-hmm. Like, that's this ever, and like you were talking about how ridiculous it is that how delayed the dental field, hygiene field, state boards, whoever it is, the combination of the above have been in trying to troubleshoot the staffing crisis and all.
Yeah.
I was sharing with you how I just posted for an RDA just, to see who's out there. I have 3 applicants. That is it. All 3 brand new to dental, like have just graduated a week ago. One of them wants $20 an hour. One wants $23 an hour, and one didn't specify. But I'm like, these people have no idea that we don't get compensated enough by insurance and things like that to pay your salary when we're going to have to teach you everything because
Right.
you know nothing coming out of your training program. Not to mention, I'm going to invest all this time in you, and there's a good chance you're going to hightail it out of here.
Right.
So, because somebody did say, I think my associate was like, well, something good about not having to break bad habits. I was like, no. And especially like that may work in a general practice, but in a pediatric practice, especially one like ours, where customer service is at the top and our patients are ridiculously demanding.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend all this time and effort training a newbie. Like
Right.
I'm not doing that. I'd rather shut down and not see as many patients, which I don't know the answer to that. But like what people are asking now is so ridiculous. None of us are going to hire you, ladies. None of us. We had one that she wanted $60 an hour as a hygiene temp. And I was like, she's like, oh, I'm a little flexible. I'm like, well, would you take half? Are you that flexible? Because I'm not even paying you $40 an hour because I know you're going to be doing foolery in my office. I'm going to have to come back and like redo a lot of what you just did and train you up and teach you how to manage these children and whatever, because I know you didn't get enough of that in your training program. But even as a general dentist, like I wouldn't trust their probing. I wouldn't trust their scaling. I wouldn't trust them to not burn somebody with a Cavitron. Like $60 an hour. Have you lost your mind? Like dentists don't make that.
Yeah.
So I just think I don't fault them. They're asking for what they think.
Yeah, what the market will pay.
Yeah, but they're not sustainable because ultimately we're all going to figure out how to get around that. But anyway, your point was, how have we been behind in our hygiene programs accepting more applicants, and that's not happening and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so my question to you then was,
What does it matter to do all of this soul searching, it sounds like?
Well, no, I mean, I think that's where we kind of stumbled on. I think it is the soul searching. Do you have a good culture in your practice that you hopefully can retain more? And we were talking about like fear of losing an employee to stupid things. Mm-hmm. Like I've got a couple in my mind that I'm like, this person could leave. She's given me some smoke signals that make me go, she's going to be leaving. But it's not to jump ship to another office.
Right.
It's to jump into a different career. I mean, that's the one we were talking about in the summer that we lost. And I think she thought it sounded good on paper. And she's making it work, but ultimately, was it a smart decision for her? Nope. Yeah. But she didn't know the difference. But that's what we're up against now. This next one that I think is going to jump ship, I think it's she saw something, like an interaction that she had. She's like, oh, that field looks cool.
Yeah.
And so how do we, I guess that's where this started was, and you kind of went back to, and we kind of worked backwards into this. It matters, like the authenticity matters, your culture matters, because there's so few people out there right now. And that's why we're talking about this.
It really does matter. And it doesn't protect us 100% from losing employees, losing patients. It doesn't protect us 100% from that. But if we do nothing, we're guaranteed to continue to lose. Or to be in this constant reevaluation process because my staff doesn't seem to be happy. My patients are fine, but I don't know, it just feels like something's off. Well, to me, we're at the stage now we have to invest more deeply in who we are as a practice owner, who we are as a practitioner, who we are as a leader amongst our team members and our community. And the soul searching, I'm not saying the soul searching is fun, but
It's awful.
I know.
It's awful.
How else do we grow? I think about all the feedback that we give our team members, right? Because we want them to grow. Or parenting, right? We're constantly giving feedback to form this person that will hopefully grow up and be a great adult, a great citizen. But at the end of the day, if we ourselves as leaders, or you as a practice owner, if we're not willing to stop and ask the people that we're around all the time for feedback, how do we grow? How do we formulate a culture that matters if we aren't really willing to talk to the people that are a part of that culture? And I know, again, that can make us really uncomfortable to think about that unless you've created like an environment like you have, or these three that I've talked about today. It's a very open, collaborative environment where that feedback isn't going to sting as much and people are going to be willing to give it more quickly.
And give it in a more constructive way,
Yeah.
I would think. Like, I think there are, now when people give me feedback, I want to say they're trying to tell me something that they think is fixable.
Yeah.
Not just bitching to bitch.
Well, and I think they trust you. They trust you to listen to the feedback and to potentially try to solve it, to do something with it. I mentioned a book that I'm listening to right now. A client recommended it, called The Speed of Trust. And it talks about the critical component of trust in any relationship. But particularly, it's focusing on workplace trust. And the fact that your team will bring you something that needs to be solved, or even bring you a critique. Like we talked about, several episodes ago, 2 of your team members brought you a personal critique. The fact that they have the trust to bring that information says to you they trust you as a person, first and foremost, to not punish them for that. But also they trust you to do something with that information. And to me, that trust is critically important in any relationship, but especially in the relationship that we have with our employees and also with our patients that we serve as well. Any other thoughts on this? I think the takeaway is seek feedback. Seek feedback we get feedback unsolicited oftentimes from our patients in the forms of reviews. So that feedback is usually there. But I think right now what I would focus on is feedback from your team.
I think my parting words would be, like, who are you? And how, that, because that does impact everything. And if you don't know yourself, you might have your own version of who you think you are, but if you're not asking, does that match up? And then that does impact the patients that are going to stick around when you drop all these insurances. Mm-hmm. It's going to impact the staff that, I just think, are you authentic? Mm-hmm. And are you authentic according to yourself or according to the people around you that you ultimately need to provide the care you want to provide?
100%. Those are great parting words.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.